Hello, friends, and welcome to a SBT Sunday teaching. My name is Venerable Tarpa, and I am thrilled to be here. It's Mother's Day today. I have very fond memories of taking my mother out to buy the outside flowers for the spring, and so I think of my mom on Mother's Day. Today, we're going to be exploring the Buddhist concept of goodness. What a perfect topic for Mother's Day, right? And so, anyways, it's quite a fascinating topic in Buddhism, and it might sound kind of dull at first. You say, goodness, what is that? Everybody's preaching goodness, but Buddhism would take it to a much deeper level. And philosophically, we really dig in. So I want to share some of that with you. It's one of the topics that I am just so intrigued by. Quite possibly one of the topics that I enjoy the most. So I'm going to try to convey some of that with you here. So in Buddhism, goodness is formally referred to as virtuous ethics. Oh, it's getting more exciting by the minute. Isn't that an even more exciting term? Virtuous ethics. To me, that doesn't resemble goodness in any way, but nevertheless, it does. I often describe goodness as logical goodness because Buddhism has a unique take on it. As you all know, Buddhist ethics or logical goodness are unique that they're not moral laws laid down by a creator or prophet like they are in other religions. In Buddhism, goodness is based on a set of simple practical values for living a skillful, productive, and harmonious life. So the Buddha, in his great wisdom, he just contemplates and logically comes up with parameters of goodness and how to apply them and benefit from them within our lifetimes. So that's quite unique, right? So we don't have a God or prophets yelling at us, telling us what to do. You know, you have the option of agreeing upon these practical values and see if for yourself. I'm going to define those here, and talking about defining, I usually define goodness as that which is conducive to positive personal development and the positive development of society. I think that's a pretty safe and secular definition, right? That which is conducive to positive personal development and the positive development of society. But yet it's so much more than that. So with SBT and in philosophy, we love to bracket things. What's bracketing? Philosophical bracketing is when we take a term we've heard a million times before, but we take a second to take a different look at it, to look at it fresh. A great example would be like a term like love. We've heard it so much, we love pizza, we love our mothers, we love our kids, and we're so inundated by it, and we're so conditioned to what it means. Do we ever really look at it objectively and say, what exactly is that quality? Anyways, we love to do this. We do it with all of the different topics we talk about. And in this case, goodness is an exceptional word to bracket. Because in that same way, you've been hearing the word goodness from the time you were just a little teeny baby, right? And we get conditioned to it. And sometimes we just get numb to it as well, right? Where it almost lacks meaning. We know what it is, but it almost lacks a meaning. Like if you were to go up to someone on the street and say, define goodness, That would be a hard definition for people to come up with, although everybody knows what it is, right? We kind of have a direct experience of it. Goodness is what gets you a treat, and being bad is what gets you a whooping. So we have a direct experience of them. And it's the same with happiness. If you ask people to define happiness, most people have a lot of trouble doing so. So we bracket a term and we try to understand it in a new light and hopefully understand it in a much deeper, more consequential, important way. And so when we look at goodness and we bracket it and we ask ourselves, what exactly is goodness? You know, when you look at its importance in the world, you realize that, it's the very first thing we learn when we're kids. It's the first thing you teach a child. You teach them how to be good and how to not be bad, right? Crying all night is a bad activity. Being not crying, being good, not being fussy is a good thing. And so we learn it when we're kids. And I think most of our lives growing up, that is the most profound topic in our studies, even though we're learning other things. Of course, we're learning reading and writing and arithmetic and all those things. But I think underlying all of that, when we're in school, when we're in different environments, what the society is really trying to teach us is how to be good, how to follow instructions, how to be obedient. It's kind of yeah. And so, we don't really think about it like that, do we? That it's a profound thing for human beings to learn, maybe more important than anything else. Then we think, besides learning it, look at the applications of goodness. Do you realize that all media of every kind, movies, books, plays, music, even paintings and things like that, are most often related to goodness and its opposite? It's hard to say what the opposite of goodness is. Buddhism doesn't believe in evil. Buddhism believes in afflictions and mental illness, but Buddhism doesn't paint that as evil. So I guess the opposite word for me would be malevolent. Benevolent meaning goodness, and malevolent meaning badness, right? But if you think about it, isn't every movie you've ever watched simply a play about good and benevolence, right? It's in songs, it's in everything we do. So, in American Westerns, the good guy always wore a white hat and the bad guy had a black hat. It's all of our history. And so it's huge. It's profound in our culture, right? And profound in our psyches. We really see the world through these lens of good and bad, right? Since we're little kids, we're conditioned to it all. So unless you're a person who possesses a deeply convoluted mental state, meaning deeply afflicted or suffering from deep mental illness, all of us have one direction in life. We're all moving. We all appreciate. We all have put energy into being good, don't we? So we want our friends to be good towards us, right? When we bracket it and say, well, what do you mean by good? Good isn't just behaving properly the way people want you to. Good is also just favorable. I mean, when we say we want our friends and family to be good to us, it's true. And in this sense, we mean by good, we mean, loyal, kind, friendly, supportive, believing in us. This is good, right? When we have experiences, we label those good and not good, good and bad, right? And what do we want in life? Of course, we want good experiences, don't we? We want good results of our actions. We want to go to school and do our studies and get good grades, right? We use the word everywhere, don't we? We want a good meal. We want a good friend. We want our kids to be good. We want the weather to be good. So I'm fascinated by bracketing goodness. And so in Buddhism, goodness is the first thing the Buddha teaches. You know, they often talk about the Buddha teaching the Four Noble Truths, that's the first of the Buddha's teachings. But actually before that, the Buddha teaches about goodness. And what he does, he teaches in a sermon, and he talks about helping people to understand what's to be cultivated and what's to be abandoned, right? And of course, what's to be cultivated, he's pointing out the good things in life, right? What leads to good outcomes, what leads to a good life, right? And what there is to abandon. And so throughout Buddhism, this is like all of our media. Throughout Buddhism, this is the center point of it all. You know, that by cultivating these good things, it leads to liberation. So you say, well, what's the cause of liberation? Well, it's doing the right things, right? It's moving in the right direction. It's moving towards goodness. You know, what's the cause for all of our suffering? Well, it's doing unskillful things that result in bad results that we don't like. So every aspect of Buddhism, it begins in this realm of good and bad. Of course, when we talk about goodness and virtue, this is front and center in the Buddha's path, the threefold path, which is the Buddha's path to awakening. The three are the development of higher understanding, the development of higher virtue, number two, and number three, the development of higher awareness, right? So number two right there in the threefold path is higher virtue, the development of higher goodness. So the three things that the Buddha recommends for enlightenment, for awakening, are those things: the development of higher understanding, higher virtue, higher awareness. That's it in a nutshell. And so in constant other places, it's the same. We see it everywhere in Buddhism. But most prominently in the Buddha's first teachings, he lays out the 10 virtuous and non-virtuous acts. Let me zoom this up a little bit, make it a little bigger for you. And so this is the Buddha's teaching on goodness, right? The 10 virtuous acts are to be cultivated. The 10 non-virtuous acts are to be abandoned. And so you can see that they're divvied up into body, speech, and mind. And everyone who's taken refuge with SBT, these are our refuge vows, but you don't have to take refuge vows to follow them. They were offered in the sutras to everyone as, again, clarity into what's to be cultivated and what's to be abandoned. I'm going to post this and let you read them all on your own. Most people here know what these are already. And so, let alone they're also in the 6 perfections, as you folks know. And but it's just front and center in all things we do in Buddhism, right? And in life. What do I want to talk about? So, could have thought I was missing something here. So, what are the benefits of goodness, right? We're going to put all this effort. We're brought up as kids to be good kids. Well, what's the benefit of it all? According to Stephen Parton he wrote a great book called The Science of Happiness. And this is a favorite quote of mine. Intentionally focusing on positive mental qualities, emotions, intentions, and thought can actually wire our minds to be more positive and to mimic or possess healthier positive states of mind, whereas complaining and focusing on negative feelings, emotions, etc., wires our minds to be more negative, angry, depressed, pessimistic, and physically and mentally more unhealthy. So the research has really supported this over and over again. Uh, so um, uh, Daniel Goleman, who wrote Emotional IQ, he's written quite a few books with the Dalai Lama, and he shares so much research dealing with it that just it used to be there was a big debate whether it was good to be a pessimist or an optimist, with both having their advantages. A pessimist sees things with hope, but the optimist is the pessimist uh, approaches world guarding against things that go bad. If you plan and if you're prepared for things to go wrong, you're never disappointed. But the optimist has hope on their side. Anyways, when I was a kid, that was a big debate. You always heard people talking about which it was. But now modern research really has come in and just said, oh, there's just no doubt about it. The optimist is the better way to live your life. They're healthier, they live longer, and there's a lot of research that says we're smarter. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit. So when we talk about that, one of the benefits of goodness is this. To me, goodness and its opposite are a form of inherent contraction and opening in our minds, meaning that the very attitude, act, or embracing of goodness is an opening. It's opening our mind to the world around us. It's opening up our mind to new ideas, to people, to the world around us, to culture. And the opposite is very clear, that when we're more pessimistic, when we're not actively cultivating goodness, it's a closing off, isn't it? It's a kind of a protective things where we close ourselves off from the world and these new things, other people, other cultures. Well, you can imagine that when we close ourselves off, we're also closing ourselves off from an amazing amount of knowledge, aren't we? We're not engaging open-heartedly with others. We're not investigating and exploring other cultures, other activities, right? So there's a wisdom that comes when we practice goodness. That opening, that open-heartedness just expands our awareness out to the world, and we just engage more with the world. We're open to new ideas, to new cultures. We develop, we evolve, we awaken, right? So to me, this idea of goodness is an expansion of my awareness. And to me, it is the process of awakening itself. And throughout Buddhism, that sentiment is shared again and again and again, that this idea of moving towards goodness is moving towards awakening itself. So goodness can be many things, though. So goodness can be, to me, well, goodness can be an intention, right? We have the intention to be a good person. Again, most people, unless they're deeply convoluted or dealing with deep afflictions or mental illness, most everybody works to some degree at being a good person. I know we can all think of a person that doesn't try very hard. That's not an issue. Let's just say most people, right? Most people really work strongly at being a good person, being a good parent. Even kids, they really work at trying to be good kids, don't they? We try to be good employees. We try to just be good human beings. I think the majority of people are trying very, very hard to be good human beings. So we have this intention that goodness is. But to me, more importantly, I think goodness should be seen as a direction, right? a direction in which to move in life. So when we say people are generally trying to be good people, well, that's a direction, isn't it? We have an idea in our minds, an archetype of what a good human being is, and then we do our best to move towards that, right? And so when we talk about goodness as a direction, all the Buddhist aspects you can think of as just this direction, this place on the horizon that we can focus and move towards. This is the greatest thing of the Buddhist path, the clarity that the Buddha gave to us. Again, what's to be cultivated, what's to be abandoned. What's to be cultivated is that point on the horizon that we're moving towards, right? When we talk about awakening, when we talk about becoming bodhisattvas, we're talking about imagining this point on the horizon of what we want, right? We can almost visualize it and we move towards that direction. To me, this is what goodness really is. Because the word itself can be subjective. Different people have different ideas of what goodness is. But we all know what it is. And we all know there's a choice, and we all know it's a direction that we're free to choose to move in. And its opposite, malevolence. We can decide, I'm sick of society and all these people. I'm going to become a criminal. I'm going to make tons of money robbing banks. It's a decision we make and a direction, isn't it? And so, to me, that's the most important thing of goodness, is understanding it as a direction. And and when you get that endpoint direction, it's like a lot of the words that are there are kind of similar, but they're all just a point on the horizon. Happiness is the same thing, all right? Satisfaction, goodness, all of these qualities, it's all kind of a package. And I see it there on the horizon. Hey, that's what I'm working towards. Why? Because I've researched it and I know what goodness is. I know what it offers. I know its benefits. And at some point, I made a decision. That's where I'm going. And talking about taking it too seriously, I became a monk because I follow goodness so strongly. So, but the idea is it was a conscious decision for me. Now, some people were conditioned when we're kids. We know about good and bad. We know we're supposed to do these things, and that's one thing. But to make it a conscious decision, and you really understand what it is, that's a different thing. And lastly, goodness is an attitude towards life. It's an openness, right? And it's almost hard to put it into words, right? That attitude of what it is. But we can be good, but we can have an attitude of goodness towards the world. So we're determined that whatever happens, I'll react in a way that corresponds with goodness, right? It's the idea that if I'm to the best of my ability, when somebody says something, I'm not going to respond angrily or with violence, right? We always can't do that, but we try, right? That's a commitment to goodness, isn't it? And that's the idea of attitude. Maybe that's the best way to put it. The attitude of goodness is a commitment to goodness. Why? Because you've explored it and you understand its benefits, and that's the best reason to move forward. And of course, goodness again is directly related to Buddhism. Every topic of the Dharma is founded in goodness. It all begins there. That's kind of at the deepest level. You realize if you were going to break down Buddhism, what would be the very deepest level of Buddhism? And it's goodness. That's it. Any questions? I've been rambling on. What do you guys think of this idea of goodness? Am I overselling it? Yes, Miss Wangmo.
I really like the idea that it's something we can do incrementally and we practice and we get better at it. Um, Even though I feel like innately we know what goodness is, right? We know the things we shouldn't be doing, but our nature and our afflictions and limitations cause us to sometimes step away from that path towards it. So I like the idea of improving little by little. And I also love how the practices that we have help us to move towards that a little more quickly than if maybe we were trying to do it all by ourselves. So I think it's great.
Beautifully said. Yeah, and then, you know, as I sit here and thinking about it and continuing to bracket it, what is goodness? Well, goodness is all the good stuff we like, right? Having more money is good. Having a nice house is good. Having a lot of friends is good. I mean, think about everything we aspire to, we would say is good, right? Having a lot of bills is bad. Being unhealthy is bad, right? Dealing with crime is bad. So goodness is kind of this weird universal term for all the good, yummy stuff in life that we all want. And that list can be different for each one of us, right? What we want. But they all, to us, they all fit into that category of good. What is good? That is good. And there's Ben and Jerry's ice cream in that box and everything else. Pasang?
Yeah, I think that from goodness, both joy and happiness comes along.
And then we could bracket that and we say, do they come from it? Or are they aspects of it? Or are they synonymous with it? You know, it's you get to the point where just all the great stuff in life kind of just is all underneath one umbrella. We kind of have different terms for it all, happiness, goodness, but they are so interrelated, aren't they? Yeah, thank you, Pastor. David, please.
I, you say that we all know what goodness is. We know it, learn it in our mother's knee. And you've also said a couple of times, we've all got different ideas of what goodness is. I don't get how you resolve that dichotomy between the two.
Cool. So, and Christian wrote a chat here. I'm going to address that in 1 second. We're going to talk about whether this is subjective or not. And it ties into David's question. So the idea is, yes, a lot of, I mean, we live in a world that is both subjective and objective. We have objective truths about things, they're fairly objective and subjective. So goodness is subjective, but it also appears to be quite objective, where when we look at societies, anthropologists look at societies across the world, even primitive ones have no connection with other ones. There are a set of underlying qualities that we all share. And to try to get to the basics of that, you could say that one of them is kind of this idea of mercy, right? Now, you could call that compassion, empathy, caring, whatever, but just the idea that human beings and a lot of other species, there's an idea that we have problems tolerating the suffering of other beings, right? And so now you can say, well, are you going to call that goodness? I'm not trying to call it goodness. I'm just trying to get to the very root of where these qualities come from. That idea of mercy, the idea that that you're doing something, there's a hungry person next to you, you really seeing them suffer, and you know what, like it or not, you're moved to help them. And regardless whether you do or not, still there is that arising of a drive in us to help that other person, right? So I would say this is where these qualities arise from, right? It seems to be a very basic human quality and of other species as well. And so, and then you can branch that out into other things. So just that idea of mercy, of justice, of fairness, which aren't always apparent in human culture, but you do have to agree it is a component, a root component of human society, in all cultures. All societies basically have a set of basic rules, right? It seems like every society in the world is against killing, at least at least of your own. You're allowed to kill other groups, you going to war, but we frown upon killing our own. Stealing is frowned upon by all cultures, and you can go on, right? Is that helpful, David?
Yes, so would it be that virtues which are agreed by all cultures we could call good, but ones that aren't agreed by some cultures we couldn't call good?
Well, the virtues that so I would word it differently. So the goodness that is inherent in us that we don't even choose, of course, that I would call that goodness. The other I would just call subjective goodness. Whether it's subjective or objective, there's still in the mind of the person, they believe they're good. You can imagine how many horrible things in history went on, people believing they were doing something good when it was truly not. So they're all subjective. So if you want to talk about authentic goodness, what is truly good and what is subjective and what could be convoluted, that's a deeper idea. But I think we just leave it with the idea that there seems to be an objective goodness that's inherent in human beings, and then there's also subjective that can arise as well. I hope that's helpful. Yeah, we're going to talk about that in 1 second. Wangmo, please share.
I was just wondering about what about things like that we have been taught are like like instinct. Like for example, not most of the time mothers instinctively want to care for their children, will passionately protect their children. Is that instinct or is that natural goodness?
Well, there's both, right? We have, science believes that we have natural instincts. You can
Mm-hmm.
see it in animals, that certain animals, even animals that, well, what's an example? How about baby turtles? They're laid as eggs, and they all automatically know to run for the water when they're born. And there's
Mm-hmm.
so many occasions of that in the animal world. There's instincts of behavior. Certain animals just know what to do. So I think that that's humans as well. But then
Mm-hmm.
we also have the opposite. We have conditional goodness that we learn, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we find out is wrong.
Right.
We could learn from our parents to be racist, and then grow up and reject that and say, oh, that. So, you know, we want to be careful. We don't want to narrow the idea of goodness too much. In fact, I'm trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to broaden the term and just show you how it
Okay.
affects every aspect of our lives. But in some ways, it almost seems like it's the very core of us.
Right.
It is the direction of life. Now, some people reject it. People who are afflicted, have mental illness, criminals. People can reject it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't born with it. And people that reject it often do it out of trauma, out of childhood trauma,
Mm-hmm.
or again, a mental illness that just could be genetic but I
Or how
think,
they were raised, the environment can play issue, right?
yeah, but I do believe goodness is, maybe we could even say it's a human drive. Why do we want it? Why do we have to be good?
Would you say that
Why is everybody working towards it? Why is everybody teaching it to the kids?
yeah. Do you think that people who are convoluted think that the things they are doing are good? Even in their mind, they're still striving to their idea of goodness.
Oftentimes, you can think about hideous historical events. Those bad people, they thought they were doing good, right? Like actors say, when you play a villain, the villain doesn't think he's bad, and also happiness, that some people are seeking happiness through malevolence, where they think, if I get even with all those people, I'll be happy. So it's quite complicated, isn't it? But it seems that it's an imperative, it's a drive of human beings this thing we call goodness. Quite fascinating, isn't it, when you look at it like that? And then the idea is that, do we have any choice in the matter? I mean, clearly you say we do, but then again, our whole worldview is shaped by this drive, this imperative, isn't it? Yeah, you could see why I find this to be a absolutely fascinating topic. And then we have another thing. How about conscience? I recently added this to some of our writings, and I haven't had that much time to contemplate it and sit on it. But the idea of how does conscience work? That we have this, now it could be conditioned, right? We could have this sense of right and wrong, this conscience that we have, that we feel good when we do good things. You know, we feel good when we help somebody that's suffering, and we feel bad if we harm another sentient being. But is that conditioned? Is it learned? Is it a natural drive? I don't have the answer to that, but I have a sneaking suspicion it comes from that innate natural drive that we have towards the direction of goodness. I have a feeling that a person born that was unconditioned, which is an impossibility, I believe that they would still have that sense of conscience. A healthy person, right? Maybe that's what we should be saying. A healthy mind. Healthy mind has an active conscience, and we find that we assert that people that have a high level of empathy and compassion, goodness, we see them as better people, don't we? We all see those as higher beings, whether it's Mother Teresa or the Dalai Lama. You know, we recognize that quality and we elevate that quality. And whether we're doing it or not, even if I'm a criminal, I still know that that's a better human being than I am, right? So yeah, I'm fascinated by it. Okay, I want to dig into Christian's point. I want to talk a little bit about this. So Buddhism believes that goodness is part of our true nature. And we've had some awesome conversations and debates on this subject. And ones that I'm very happy we have. It's given all of us so much clarity. And being a secular Buddhist group, we love to question all this stuff that's told us we're supposed to believe. So, but the idea of a true nature, you know, do human beings have a true nature? And first of all, we want to kind of define that. So when we're talking, I think the understanding or the sound of that term, true nature, can be a bit misunderstood. I think to a lot of Buddhists, it would mean Buddha nature. And Buddha nature is the idea that all sentient life have the potential to awaken. Something I agree with, but some traditions of Buddhism see Buddha nature as more of an idea that you're already awakened and you don't realize it. And all you have to do is peel away all these levels of ignorance and you're an awakened being. That doesn't work very well against Buddhist scriptures because the idea is once you're awakened, you can never go back to an unawakened state. So when we talk about true nature, that's not what we're talking about here. A better a term to clarify this would be, I like foundational characteristics, right? So true nature, we're talking about foundational characteristics of beings, and all beings have them, right? According to Buddhism, human beings, our foundational characteristics are that of are naturally pure, benevolent, compassionate, and wise. Especially the Tibetan tradition, they really prop that up. We're just amazing beings underneath it all, and we're just dealing with layers and layers of affliction. So as we peel those afflictions away, we can begin to access and experience our true nature. In the sutras, going back to the Theravada, we had some question about where did this idea originate from. I had it as part of my education in the Tibetan tradition, but it was a wonderful question. So digging in a little bit in the Theravada Sutras, the Buddha claims that the mind is inherently pure and radiant. So one difference is the Tibetans talk about our true nature, right? Where in Theravada they talk about the true nature of the mind, which you could say, well, aren't they one and the same? Our identity, what we think we are, is all a product of the mind. So they can be seen as being synonymous. So the mind is inherently pure and radiant, but it becomes obscured by defilements. Through meditation and mindfulness, practitioners aim to uncover this natural, true radiance. Another passage in a sutra talks about the nature of the mind is said to be clear and knowing. And Bhikkhu Bodhi likes to say that the mind is naturally luminous, but obscured by defilements. So it does seem like this idea of human beings possessing a true nature, a fundamental characteristic, is supported throughout the sutras. And so when we talk about fundamental characteristics, you can think that all species have fundamental characteristics, right? When we talk about a snake. A snake, all snakes have basic characteristics. So besides the actual physical shape and abilities of a snake, they also have characteristics, the way they go about hunting and things like that. Spiders have characteristics. Most of them spin webs. All animals have characteristics. Birds have characteristics. I don't know if we could say flying is a characteristic, but even just the way they go about, making nests would be a characteristic, things like that. So clearly, all species have characteristics and different characteristics, right? And then you could say, well, sentient life in general has characteristics, and things like the 5 remembrances, right? All sentient life is born and going to die. All sentient life is going to be subjective to illness and injury, right? So there's a little bit of an explanation of what we mean by true nature. We mean these characteristics. So we're saying that human beings, underneath it all, we have this beautiful, pure nature. And now to support that, practitioners often find this for themselves, because the reason we don't experience our true nature is because of all these afflictions we all deal with: immaturity, ignorance, selfishness, and then the emotions, hatred, envy. Whatever stimuli comes up, we have a different response. But the fact is when in meditation and practice, when we calm ourselves down, and the calmer we get, the less power those afflictions have over us. Those afflictions are heavily fed by our speediness, our busyness, our exaggerated sense of immediacy. Everything is so important at every moment, right? That feeds our afflictions. But when we calm down and get profoundly calm, like in a state of meditation, you can witness the afflictions falling away. And what you're left with every single time you meditate is this pure state of being. No one meditates and goes deep and finds anger. Things can come up. Don't get me wrong. A memory can come up and trigger an emotion that you can work with. But just generally, every time you meditate, you find contentment, you find joy, right? You find our benevolent qualities. You come out of meditation with a sense of love and care, brotherhood for the world. So you can actually experience this in practice. And then serious meditators, they carry that throughout their days. I'm sure all of you could testify that myself, through all the Buddhist practice and meditation I've done, I've become a much gooder person. All of those qualities are they just become natural. I don't think about it. Being compassionate and caring, they've just become natural qualities of me because I've worked at nurturing these qualities, right? And those afflictions have less and less power over me. Yes, I still deal with them. Yes, I still get angry. I can still be impatient, but hardly at all these days, right? And if I do, it's very small. I get over it really quickly. And oftentimes at the end, I think, oh, I shouldn't have got angry, you know? So through the practice of Buddhism, I mean, it's just so obvious that we're becoming better human beings. Is better an okay term? Gooder? More evolved, maybe? Oftentimes we just say awakened, right? Because we're awakening to the goodness, we're awakening to compassion, we're awakening to our true nature, we're awakening to all of the wonderful, benevolent qualities we all aspire to. All of humanity basically aspires to the same set of benevolent qualities. We often get off track and some kind of ideology will pull us in the wrong direction. But on a basic level, those benevolent qualities of caring for others, of justice, those are kind of, it seems like they're quite inherent in all of us. Okay, I'm up for questions and comments. What do you think of all that? I've used up all the oxygen in this room. David, please share.
I found that completely inspirational, Tarpa. You've solved a couple of problems I've had for years. Thank you.
Oh, good, good, good. How about the rest of you deadbeats? You all got your cameras off. Don't call them deadbeats. It was a joke. I'm in a silly mood.
Brilliant teaching.
Oh, thank you. But are you developing that fascination like I have? It
Yes,
is
I am.
fascinating, huh?
Yeah.
When you look in the biggest way possible, step back as much as you can, and you just look at, let's say we're way out in the universe, seeing that blue marble of Earth, and you're picturing all the people, and you just, wow, they're all aspiring to one thing, is goodness. Because if you want to be rich or famous or successful, why? To be happy, but because it would be good, right? When you think you want to be happy, well, happiness is kind of linked to goodness, isn't it? So you look at that little blue marble and you realize every single human being on that planet has one aspiration to be good and happy. Kind of put the two together. They want good things to happen. They don't want bad things to happen. Did I answer your question, Christian? Ah, good. And of course, goodness is linked to karma. I didn't want to really get into a big karma thing here. But the idea that, according to the Buddha, the reason we want to be good is because good produces better results. Sometimes we make bad decisions. We might decide we want to do something unskillful. At the moment, we think we might want that. But the Buddha says, no, if you're logical, you can really connect certain results to certain styles of action or flavors of action. And the Buddha said in his great wisdom, I found that actions with the flavor of goodness produce way better results than actions with the flavor of selfishness, immaturity, ignorance. That's basically that. Oh, I have a question here. Peter.
Yes, I just recently came in, but I think you may have touched on this, but how do you explain karma with people that are born with cognitive disabilities?
Oh, that's a tough one. So traditionally, they have a really easy answer. You did something bad in your last life. Somehow you deserve it, right? But as secular Buddhists, we have a more of a objective, we might say a scientific view. So, sometimes causes and conditions can be so complex that it's just impossible to see what arises from that. Scientifically, someone is born with any kind of cognitive issues, or they might look at it genetically and just say, just bad luck of the mixing of genes. Maybe there was a little gene thing in the mother, and when the father's gene came together, it created this other thing. So my own personal opinion is I can't really define an answer to those. It's so complex. For me, I see karma more in relation to my actions in my life. I often talk about karma being a form of momentum in our lives. So you think about all the things you do, all the things you work towards, right? Getting a good education, getting a good job, developing skills, networking, and developing good loyal friends, family. All of that has a momentum, right? And this is what karma is. And depending on your attitude, that direction can move in different directions. So, but the idea is that all of these things that we do, they have a momentum to them, and they move us forward, and that's what I see as karma. And when we do skillful things, then that leads to skillful results. And when we act unskillfully, that leads to unskillful results, or results that we don't care for. Was that an okay definition? Was that okay, Peter?
I'm still confused on the concept. I mean, I understand how you said like your before life could have possibly been the direct result of that person being born with a cognitive disability. But I guess to add to that, when they're living their life and they can't conceptualize, how do they engage in that karma practice of doing good if they can't conceptualize it?
Yeah, so to your first point, I mentioned that that's how traditional Buddhism looks at karma, that everything is just a result of a past cause. That's not my belief. As a secular group, we don't necessarily emphasize rebirth. Some of our members believe in rebirth, some of them don't. So I try to look at it a little bit more, again, more scientifically. And to your second point, which is a great one, what happens if you don't have the cognitive ability to understand the difference between them all? I think at very subtle levels, even small children, they just in a little way, they still have the ability of direction, of knowing what direction, of to follow mom's instructions or to not. And then of course there's a result, right? Follow mom's instructions, you get a cookie. You go against it, you get a spanking. So that's a great point. And then it gets even more interesting when we think about animals. How can animals that have, as we guess, have very little cognitive ability to ponder those things, would they produce karma as well? So you bring up some great points that I don't think there's really answers to, but we can talk about what it is for human beings to experience karma. And karma is simply that when we act in a skillful way, no matter what we do, there's a result, and that's kind of a momentum, right? And so what we do, the direction, the attitude of that action produces a similar effect. So if you go around and punch all your neighbors in the nose, I think sooner or later bad things will happen to you by one of your neighbors. But if you go around and you give loaves of bread to all your neighbors, then you could imagine that result would have a very different effect. And you could see how those actions would have a momentum, wouldn't they? You do that kind of goodness for all your neighbors. Sooner or later, something's going to come out of it. Somebody's going to bring you a loaf of bread. So many people start waving to you more when you're driving by. If something happens, you're going to have friends to count on. That's all I got, Peter. Christian, please. You need some help?
So I was going to say, it feels like you're describing my job. So I work with people with extreme cognitive impairments that if you maximize your thoughts, that's probably what I'm dealing with every day. My mother had extreme bipolar. My father had extreme ADHD, and I've inherited some of that. But fortunately, it's nature and nurture that we're talking about, I think, mostly. So it's about karma. So it depends on that person's personal ability. So some people don't realize what they're doing. So it's very individual what we're talking about. I don't think we can have a sweeping generalization.
Yeah, but let's leave it. The idea is a spectrum. Even people with severe cognitive
Yeah,
abilities, I think there is still
yeah,
they're still conscious at some level of what they do. So yeah,
yeah,
not an
yeah.
easy
I
task.
don't know if that affects karma or not. Because like I say, it's very, very individual, isn't it?
Karma really comes down to just the process of cause and effect. Every cause has an effect, and
Yeah.
the flavor of that cause produces a similar effect. Maybe that's the easiest way to say it. And then how conscious people are of that apparatus, that method, and how to work with it, that's another story. But karma is just, it's not superstitious, it's not a religious thought, it's a very basic function of life. You can't deny the idea of cause and effect. And then the idea that causes produce a certain kind of effect, right? Miss Wangmo?
I was just going to mention real quickly, we touched on that in class last night, and one of the things they talked about, if you are somebody who believes in in rebirth and that kind of thing, is that we can take our merit and our loving kindness and share it with those who don't have those cognitive abilities. And I thought that was kind of really special way to look at it.
And kind of debatable in Buddhism too, the idea that you
Mhm.
can share merit with another being. So, but yeah, it's a pretty thought. Yeah, Shiva?
Tarpa, just a question on this discussion, if I may. Um, what is your opinion on a statement I want to make? Like, not all aspects have to be looked at from the point of karma, right? Some things are like uh, just how things happen. Like, why is there evolution and things like that?
Exactly right.
Uh, it's just I just wanted to ask you that, like,
So the idea is
our
that,
actions. Yeah,
yeah,
sorry.
karma is a unique form of cause and effect for a sentient life. Other things like the workings of the universe, of the growth of plant life, of weather, things like that, those can never have or create karma. It takes a mind to create karma, right? Those things are cause and effect, you know? But for sentient beings with a mind,
I
we
see.
we call it karma. So it's just a distinct form of cause and effect.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Oh, good question. Peter.
Yes. I believe the guy that was just talking, may have had almost the same question as me, maybe a little different, but kind of keeping karma out of the equation, just to assume. Um, would you say that reincarnation could have different effects, like in the sense that reproduction, like if a parent and another parent come together, that reincarnation is in the form of their child, for instance.
That's a popular theme.
Yeah, what would you say about those type of concepts of
Oh,
reincarnation?
it's very popular. It's wonderful. They also talk about secular Buddhists often talk about rebirth in the aspect of in every moment we're reborn because all our cells are regenerating, and so there's a lot of different views on that. Um, I try not to try to justify rebirth. We leave it to the practitioners whether they have a belief in it or not. I don't think there's enough real evidence to support an academic discussion on it. But yeah, that's what I kind of think. So yeah, we don't need the word karma. We can just call it all cause and effect. But the word karma comes in just related to the cause and effect of human beings, in my humble opinion. Hey, can I move on to one last thing? I wanted to share, I'm going over, I thought it was going to be a short teaching. I wanted to go over just an important thing. Well, how do we practice it? All right, we got the idea goodness is good. It's something, that's the direction we want to move in. How do we practice it? So the first thing is to understand it deeply, goodness, and acknowledge the true power and importance of goodness. And when we talk about power, again, think about that image I had that we're stepping back from the world and we're seeing this blue marble filled with all these billions of beings, and they all are moving in one direction. Most of them are moving towards goodness. And the ones that aren't are oftentimes they're just convoluted that there still are. I mean, that power of goodness is being this, quite possibly, the strongest single drive of human beings beyond reproduction. I think reproduction is more biological, where goodness seems to be different. And the second thing is to understand it as a direction, to understand goodness and to see it as a direction to move towards. It's not something we ever finally just grasp pure goodness. It's always just a direction that we're moving towards and helping others to move towards it as well. And one of the important things is to wake up in the morning and really set your intentions. Today, I'm going to be a good person. Today, I'm going to work towards goodness, fairness, maturity, intelligence, selflessness. I'm going to be an altruistic, benevolent, wonderful human being. But just having that intention is probably the greatest thing you can do. And then for others, we practitioners, we uphold vows and precepts, like the 10 virtuous actions that we shared. We take vows to uphold those. Those are helpful to us. So those are tools for us to remember, let alone working towards goodness. But what is goodness again? What are the parameters of it? And the 10 virtuous and non-virtuous acts is a very good start. At higher levels, we can maintain a lot of vows. We start with 10 precepts and refuge, then we have 26 precepts of goodness of the Bodhisattva, and then 46 for the lay ordained, 76 for a monastic ordained, and they are all precepts of goodness, aren't they? Every single one is aimed at achieving goodness. You ever think about it like that? Huh. And the other one is just simply following the Buddhist path. All the knowledge, all the skills, all the practices we share are aimed at one thing. Can you guess what that one thing is? Everybody, goodness. Yeah, so you can almost say that awakening, I have to say awakening is synonymous with clarity, but it's almost like awakening is the profound attainment of goodness, isn't it? You think about the Buddha, we think about, he's wise and he's this and that. Do we ever just say, he's just the goodest person we know? He's gooder than everybody else. That's all I got for you. Any following thoughts? Anybody have any questions? That was fun, huh? So I want you all to go out and be good. And don't be bad. Okay? Why don't we end today's teaching with our altruistic affirmation? May all be healthy, may all be prosperous, may all be well, may all be present, free of past regret and future worry. May all abide in constant appreciation, which is the source of great joy and contentment. May all realize their true nature and the true nature of reality, which is good, which is awakening. Thanks, friends. Good seeing y'all.